Sylvia Sparks wore big round specs that looked just like the old lorgnettes, with a handle fixed upon one side that grown-ups held up to the eye. Sylvie's school was called St. Sid's. Her class had 31 kids. Some others in the school had glasses, like Molly Min in Cedar class, who also was severe myopic. When her class did nature topics, she could only see her nose, though she loved to hold and smell a rose. Molly was an avid learner, so to see more and even further, she hid a gadget in her pocket, a small contraption made of plastic. But once, when she was in gymnastics, Mervyn Briggs pinched her device, and ignoring everyone's advice, he crushed it in a metal vise, which frankly was not very nice. Of course, he had to pay the price, but Molly burst into floods of tears that must have lasted 7 years. Sylvia wore gigantic specs with concave lens made from perspex. To be precise, they were Trivex, which she preferred to polycarbonate as they were light and scratch resistant, concave meaning curving inward. And thus her learning was not hindered. It made the board a little clearer, which seemed to help to cheer her. They definitely helped a little, though not when she sat in the middle and certainly never at the back, when all she saw was fuzzy black. In Sylvia's class of 5-year-olds, some were slightly uncontrolled. The teacher called them full of beans. Her mum said they should eat their greens. The noisiest was Bobby Boyd, though mainly when he was outside. At playtime, all Bob did was eat Haribos, his favourite sweet. Plus chocolate, fudge and jelly beans. He often crashed in the canteen to feast upon his custard creams. Bobby was extremely bubbly, hyperactive but sometimes funny. His mummy said it was the sugar and she called it his candy trigger. But Bobby never bothered Sylvie. Their teacher was called Marcus Mills, and Mr. Mills was Jack the lad. He was young and cheeky, but not so bad. Being new to this profession, he'd only taught the kids 1 session, and when it came to Sylvia, he didn't really understand her. He didn't know she couldn't see. He'd no idea she couldn't read what he wrote so efficiently. As he scribbled on the board, certainly his words were heard, but text was altogether blurred, so inevitably she fell behind. Now, after just his 2nd day, the teacher took their work away, and Marcus undertook to mark a page of writing by Miss Sparks, and what with errors in her text, it looked like little was correct. This little lassie must be struggling. In his head, such thoughts were bubbling. For this sweet child I must simplify, and every task I'll modify. Yet Mr. Mills was unaware that Sylvia's vision was impaired. In truth, her talent was not lacking. In fact, her spelling skills were cracking. But being unable to detect the letters she could not inspect, their meaning to her was not clear, and thus a dullard she appeared. In very truth, in actual fact, Sylvia, in her council flat, spent evenings reading this and that, so many stories and poetry that she dreamt of chocolate and factories, plus Matilda and the BFG, and the Gruffalo, the Giving Tree. She'd read whatever she got her hands on. A.A. Milne, Enid Blyton, Beatrix Potter, Julia Donaldson, Jacqueline Wilson, Michael Rosen, David Walliams, J.K. Rowling. Sylvia's reading was amazing. Her grasp of language was astounding, but reading books was quite a strain and poked her eyes with a sharp pain. So Mum had found a charity to modify them properly. Big books were large and hard to fold, with writing that was big and bold, and thick dark words on a light background, so it was a snap to get around. Thus she had them made for her and customised to cut the blur. Sylvia Sparks was very young when gradually it dawned on Mum that she was bumping into things like tabletops and rubbish bins, and often she would lose her place while stuffing beans into her face. And what is more, she hit the door and banged her nose in corridors. and sometimes didn't know her mummy's face from Uncle Joe's. She saw a doctor for her eyes, and the news that came was no surprise. Your Sylvia has an eye disease. It's called an optic dystrophy, which really means, if I must tell, your Sylvie doesn't see so well. The doctor's sorry diagnosis just meant Sylvie could not focus. Back in school, Marcus tried to make her work much simplified. He took his time to speak more slowly and monitored her progress closely. He wrote his letters very clearly and never punished her severely. He gave her smaller tasks to do and praised her when success ensued. His strategies were exemplary. Just one thing missing: empathy. With no idea what was in her mind or what she thought of how he tried. Exactly what and how she felt, he genuinely could not tell. How could he know? And who could say? How can a child of 5 convey the way she struggles hard to view 5 + 5 or 2 × 2? Even words like say and do, when they're too far away to see, they may be as tiny as a bee, and words of rhymes and songs too dim, they were impossible to sing. And although she tried everything, thus Marcus puzzled every day until he knew not what to say. Sylvia Sparks seemed to improve in concentration and in mood, but something clearly was not right. And how was he to know? It was her sight. "I'm sorry, sir, I have a problem. Even though your teaching's awesome, please, sir, it is my eyes. I was born with a nasty ailment, an eye disease, a slight impairment. It's embarrassing to explain, but if this interference in my brain, it stops me learning as others do and messes up my field of view. Plus, it affects my social skills, and no one knows just how I feel." A light turned on in Marcus's head. He saw the truth in what she said. He realised, unintentionally, he'd been barking up the wrong tree. If Sylvie's problem was her vision, there were many implications. From dull and dingy light and gloom to cluttered walls throughout the room, from seating plans and size of print, right down to all the lesson content. This thing was manifestly serious, and Marcus just felt inexperienced. It happened at St. Sid's one morning. A young man came who was quite charming. He chatted at the school assembly and brought a guide dog named Henry. This guy was clearly blind as a bat and introduced himself as Matt. "Look," he said, "I have no sight. Imagine walking home at night and seeing no one in the road. I hope you know your Green Cross code. All I have is this big cane and this dog. Henry is his name. He's my friend and he's my guide. Henry's always at my side." And in this fashion, Matt described what life is like if you are blind. The children loved to hear him talk, and especially the dog, of course. The children paid quite close attention, yet to Marcus it was like a revelation. It got him asking many questions. So before he left, he gave the number of a guy called Harry Plummer, a special vision teacher guru. Harry Plummer made a start to find out how to help Miss Sparks. First, we need some more precise and detailed facts on Sylvie's sight, to know exactly how or when this little angel comprehends. Harry carried on his back a brightly coloured large backpack in which he toted everywhere his tools of trade, it would appear: magnifiers, eye charts, means for measuring all eye parts. A fuzzy outlook in the distance can be improved with some assistance, and what is bleary at close quarters is often boosted with support. This advice came just in time, and crucially, it seems to rhyme. Harry's advice covered all sorts, from ceiling lights to games and sports, the size and colour of a ball, to markings in the swimming pool. Harry scrutinised the school, the doors, the corridors and hall. Everything he recommended, all the governors commended. Thus, Harry's pertinent proposals clearly had the school's approval, and with a month of some adjustments, Silvia seemed much more content. Now she coped in lessons well, and even started to excel, which goes to show that all you need is sometimes only just to heed what children sometimes want to share, to tell you what you need to hear.